All right, we're live. We're back. Welcome, everybody. This is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today, I'm joined by Paul Singh. He's calling out of the Valley. Paul Singh, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. I have a little bit of a format. I like to start off with just like Everest Labs, right? AI. What are you guys doing there? Maybe just give us a sentence or two. We'll maybe put that topic on ice after this and come back to it near the end of the interview. But I like to let people know, what it is that you're working on today, and maybe just a couple sentences.
So let me give you the buzzwordy version first, and then I'll give you the.
Okay, go ahead.
So the buzzwordy version is we are a physical AI company focused on processing industries. But the work where we make most of our revenue is we have built a whole AI system and robots for the recycling industry. So we help them increase their recycling. We help them deal with the labor issues. We help them get more recovery and therefore be able to, reduce the carbon footprint as well as increase the recycling in the industry.
Great, great. Yeah, I was just enamored by what I was seeing on your website in terms of the work you guys do, right? I mean, this is like the actual rubber meets the road. It's robots actually helping humans today, not some futuristic pipe dream. So very, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, safety of people and, all the issues that plant operators deal with that helps them solve a lot of those issues. I mean, this is one place where I don't think human beings really want to work or should work. So how do we automate that and make it safer for them so they can be in a control room and actually know what's going on, and when there is an issue, they can get up and fix it.
Got it. Awesome. Cool. So let's maybe rewind a little bit. I was reading about your past. So you grew up in India, right? And you studied electrical engineering at the Delhi
Yeah.
College of Engineering. So what was it about engineering that pulled you in early on?
Well, I don't think I really knew much about it, to be very frank. It was more like, those were the cool professions. If you did really well in high school, then, you either went into medicine or you went into engineering. And I did not want to go into medicine, so I ended up in engineering.
That sounds a lot like my career path as well. Yeah, either engineering or doctor. So after Delhi, you came to the US and got your MBA in quantitative analysis at St. John. So that's a big leap, right? From EE to business. What drove that shift?
So, I spent a couple of years after graduation in India, and I worked as a sales engineer, if you might equivalent to that. And then it was clear to me that, hey, my path was going to be charted towards the business side and not purely technical route. And as I always say that, hey, as far as technology is concerned, I'm dangerous, but you still can't BS me. So that's the path I took, and I went more and more towards the business side after that, and that has been my path after that.
You wrote a book about getting networks connected to the internet. What was that era like for you, working on the early internet?
So I mean, we lived through the internet 1.0 or precursor to 1.0. That was the time I did my first startup. And I felt that, hey, the world was changing around us. There are things that are going to be important. And one of the things I saw that was really going to come into the market is people are going to worry about the security of connecting to their networks to the internet. And so we looked around and said, okay, what is the biggest networks today? And the biggest network at that time was NetWare. So we said, okay, why don't I build a solution for the NetWare network to protect against the attacks? And so we built a firewall for the NetWare networks initially. And while we were building this product, I got one of the book publishers approached me at a trade show, and he quizzed me for a couple of hours, and after that, he gives me his business card and he says, "Hey, if you ever want to write a book, why don't you approach me and we can help you write a book on this topic, because this is going to be, we think there is a need in the market to educate people on these things." So I kind of didn't put much attention to it and then one day I was on a phone call with a customer, and I probably spent maybe 2 hours talking to them about our software and educating them on everything. And I came home and I was telling my wife that when I was a consultant, I could have probably been paid over $1,000 for that time. And now I don't even know if this guy's ever going to buy $1,000 software from me. And so she said, "Then why don't you go write that book that you mentioned? At least if nothing else, you will give him that book to read." And so that was the impetus. And, it was a hard one to do because you were doing a startup at the same time. But I think it was the right time, and it also helped us basically promote our leadership, promote the book at the same time. And the book promoted the company and the products and everything. So this all kind of worked out very well.
And before you started founding companies, what was the first job that really, shaped how you think about tech and business?
So I think my very first job out of college was in a company called Larsen Tuber out of India. And I think they really probably shaped me more than any other job did. And the reason I say that is the company had a philosophy that when you are coming in, we're going to throw you in the middle of things and let you do your own way. And if you succeed, wow, great. And if you fail, you will just leave the company. And I was thrown into some of these really problems that maybe for me they were very important. Maybe they were not as important to the company, but they wanted to see how do I do. And so that kind of really shaped my thinking about lots of things as to management and companies and all that philosophy. And then obviously after that, I worked at many other tech companies, and things continue to evolve because one of the things you learn in the, working in Silicon Valley is that it's not just about you getting rich. It's about making other people rich around you, which is as important as you getting rich. Only then the things work well, right? Because you got to make everybody participate in that thing. And this is why most of the tech companies start with giving an equity right from the beginning to most employees. It's starting to change, but that's kind of what culturally Silicon Valley has always done.
Got it. So, growing up in India and then, moving to the US for your career, like how did that experience of being an immigrant shape your approach to risk and entrepreneurship?
So, I think the first time you just can't really, jump into an entrepreneurship quite the same way. In fact, maybe I'll tell you a story which might put this in perspective. Um, so while I was doing my first job in the US, I used to work with this couple, and they were good friends of mine. And one day that, you know, the wife who I used to work with came to me and said, "Hey, we've decided, both me and my husband, we're going to start a company." I said, "Oh, what are you going to do?" They're like, "Oh, we're going to make IBM compatible PCs and sell them." And those were the days it was a big market for it, right? And I was like, you are an executive assistant. Your husband is an accountant. What do you really know about making a computer? And they're like, "No, my husband spent a week with somebody, and he now knows how to assemble a computer. And we're going to go do it." Okay. So I said, why don't you take, at least one of you should continue the job. Why are you both quitting? She says, "Because we want to make sure that there is no other source of income and that we will make it work." And to their credit, they made it work. They built a very decent sized company before they sold it. And so I used to help them sell in computers and flea market in those days, because that's where there used to be a computer electronic flea market in Silicon Valley almost every week somewhere. And I used to help them sell those IBM compatible PCs, and learned a lot in that process. And many times they told me to just, hey, why don't you come and do the same thing with us, become part of the company. But for me at that time, it was like, I got to be safe, right? And don't have a green card yet. I have a job. I got to make sure of all those things. So I think the immigrant experience for me was like, I just can't jump to that. Where my kids can, but I can't, right? Because I needed to build that little bit of a nest egg before I go do these things. So that was a big change. For me, it took some time to get to that level when I felt comfortable that, hey, I have a year's or 18 months of safety for me so that my family will be well protected. I was willing to take the risk. And that's when I did my first startup.
I love it. So you've talked about the hard knocks of entrepreneurship. Was there anything in your early life that prepared you for that grind?
I know a lot of people say they were selling something at 13 and doing all this thing. I'm sorry, I didn't have any of those moments. But one thing I did always see with my father, a lot of parents talk about hard work, and hard work is so important and all that to their kids. But I think the demonstration that my father did by working hard was probably more valuable than any advice he would have given me. So he would start his day around 6 a.m. working on a job, finish it by 1 o'clock. Then he will go to his business and be part of the business until 7 o'clock. And he did that for years and years. And so that kind of hard work and dedication and trying to work to make life better for us, I think that was a more telling moment, more learning moment for me than anything he could have told me or I would have learned from here or there, because that just taught me what it means to do hard work.
So if your 20-year-old self could see where you ended up, like what would surprise him the most?
Um, I would have never thought that I would be in the US. I had no desire or none of the things I was trying to do this. It just so happened after my first job, I was kind of like thinking, okay, I need to go back to school, because if you might, I'm kind of getting bored from doing the same thing again and again. And so at that time, my choice was look in India or look outside. And I felt that, hey, maybe I think it'll be a better experience to experience it outside. And frankly, I didn't know one city from the other. We'll go in, USIS in Delhi and look at Barron's Guide. That was the only thing that was available, and look at all the schools. And maybe there was a little tiny picture that you could see. And then you made a decision of where to apply. Or somebody. So I happened to know somebody who worked with me who had gone to Louisiana, and he told me, hey, why don't you apply here? Okay, I'll apply here. Besides 10 other places that I chose, because you also had a budget, because you had to each of the applications cost money, and it was not easy enough to spend all kind of money on this. So I did apply, and then finally I got full scholarship from uh, actually in University of Louisiana in Monroe. And I actually spent a year there. And then In the summer, they had no assistantships, and I had no money, so I had to figure out a way to survive. So I piled on one of my relatives in New York for the summer. Then they told me, "Hey, why the heck do you want to go back? Why don't you try for a scholarship here?" And I did, and St. John's agreed to give me the scholarship, and I stayed back and never went back to Louisiana after that. That's
So,
basically.
you founded something like 5 startups and had 4 exits. So walk me through the very first one. What gave you the guts to start a company from scratch? I mean, you shared a little bit about the where the seed was planted, but yeah, how did you take that first dive?
So I think, I was, like today, the whole world is enamored with AI. So
Uh-huh.
me as a young person was enamored with the internet and thought, okay, this is going to change the world. I need to be part of it. And interestingly, it's trying to figure out how to kind of go about what are the problems. And so I'd gone to a trade show and my flight got delayed. And so I was grabbing a drink with one of the resellers that I had worked with in the past. And we were just talking. And I don't even remember his name anymore. It's been that long, and because there was no LinkedIn or anything to maintain those connections, and your phone didn't have a phone number stored either because your phone was a desktop, right? Um, so we were talking about it, and we started discussing this issue of network people are scared of connecting to the internet. They don't know how, and they are having these issues. So I said, we could solve this problem. And he said, you know what, if you could give me a box which has internet on one side and netware on the other, I could sell hundreds of them. So I came back and talked to my technology folks that are capable of helping me build that product. And they said, no, forget the box. I think I can give you a software which will do the same thing. So I said, okay, why don't you give me an MVP? You got a month and let's see if you can produce an MVP. And they did. The rest is history. That was the starting point. And we said, hey, there is something here. Let's continue.
Taking Veraz Networks public on the NASDAQ is a huge milestone. What was the moment during that journey where you thought, okay, this is actually going to work?
So Viraz journey was so Viraz started out as a company, we called it IPverse, which was essentially, our theory was that, look, IP networks are becoming more and more reliable. So the voice is going to carry as a packetized system on all the IP networks. Today that looks strange because it already has happened, right? So we didn't kind of, if I tell you something, you'd say, oh my God, was that the case? Our voice used to be running on analog systems for a long time. And so our philosophy was going to make that happen. And the other philosophy was that the network will be software driven. It won't be hardware driven. So our goal was that we're going to build that software intelligent layer, which will control no matter which hardware you have. It doesn't matter. So we started that journey. We did pretty well. There were only one or two competitors of ours who were doing something similar, even though the overall market was growing quite a bit. And we were doing pretty well. We were at a stage where, like all the so-called unicorns, so even though we didn't have that $1 billion market cap in those days, because that was not common with the startups, but the yesteryear's unicorn, i.e. that a company that can go public at $1 billion market cap was considered the unicorn of that time. And so we were kind of in that category. We were trying to go public, and our investors said, hey, why don't you go raise a mezzanine round and then let's go public, because we need to have another $30-40 million in the bank so that we public markets get delayed. So we went to New York and Boston and got a commitment for about more than half the money. 2 weeks later, 9/11 came, and all the commitments were off. All the customers' commitment of selling things or buying things from us was all gone. So here we are, company of 100 and, somewhere around 161 people, something like that. And having like almost running out of money suddenly. And I have never seen a sad moment in Silicon Valley worse than that time when, like traffic was light, unemployment was at an all-time high. And we sat down with our investors, and to their credit, they said, hey, I think there is something here. We're going to discontinue a lot of companies, but we want to keep you guys alive. But you know what? I'm not going to have that much staff. I can't take that many people. You got to figure out a way to reduce how many employees you have. Give me a plan with 61 people, and then I'll fund it. And that was probably the worst day of our lives, when I had to get rid of 100 people on one day. But it was a matter of survival, right? So we did that, and the business was still kind of slow. But over time, we discovered that the market had changed because of, so even though we believe that software is defined network is the future, but the customer wasn't willing to go there anymore. Customer wanted to buy from one company which had everything in it, because they were just feeling insecure. They didn't think that, hey, the future is the way I should go it, because they just wanted to go in the way that they were comfortable with. So we ended up buying a division of ECI Telecom out of Israel, which was building the media gateways, which we didn't have. And then we combined the two companies and started to rebuild the company again. And so that was 2003 when we did the merger with them. And then it took us 4 years to sort of rebuild the company again. And then we filed in 2007 and went public.
You said that one of your startups didn't make it, right? So I guess what happened in that case? What did you learn from that failure that, perhaps the wins couldn't teach you?
So the startup was called PixSense. And in fact, there is a HBS study on it as well. So we were trying to build the Instagram on a smartphone before iPhone. And so I think we were too early. And there were many other lessons, like we didn't really have a control on our channel, because in those days, the mobile products were never sold over the air. You had to go to the operator, and operator put it on their network, and they were the only way you could sell it. And so there was too much dependence on different segments where we really didn't have a control. So that was the other lesson we learned. And then sometimes, when you're too early, you get arrows on your back, right? I mean, I remember in those days and going to Silicon Valley VCs and saying, hey, you can take this Nokia Series 40 and 60 phone, and you can download this app and look what a magic it does. And some very well-known VCs would say, why would anybody do that in their life? I just don't see it. And mind you, this was only 2 years before iPhone came. The world changed.
The world changed. So you
We couldn't move it fast enough, right? So that was the other thing. You could say, oh, why didn't you move? Yeah, we tried to move, but by that time we had kind of come to a stage where it was harder to move.
yeah.
Sometimes you have few customers and they kind of slow you down. You just can't
Mm,
move that quickly.
mm,
Having customers is good, and sometimes it can be bad.
mm. So Paul, saying you have this formula, 3 parts passion, 2 parts execution, 1 part practicality. When did that formula click for you? Was there like a specific moment?
I think it's kind of been brewing for a while because I have seen many people who are very passionate, right? And I've seen entrepreneurs that are not kind of, they're passionate about an idea one day and then next day they are on to a different idea and then they're on to a different idea. That doesn't seem to work, right? The entrepreneurs that have a passion for an idea that they really just want to go at it, normally I see them succeed. But at the same time, many entrepreneurs who have pure passion don't make it work because if they don't know how to execute, I always tell the entrepreneurs ideas are dime a dozen. What matters is who executes and how fast do they execute. So that's kind of where that comes from. And, you still need that voice of reason because a lot of times when you forget the forest from the trees and you're so caught up in your, day and day grind of what you're really working on, you need some external perspective to give you that practicality of, hey, are you doing the right thing? Maybe this is not the right path. And so that's where I came up with the third one.
So you also worked as an EIR at Lightspeed Ventures, Venture Partners. How did sitting on the investor side change how you thought about building companies?
So I think the EIR role is very different in different companies. My role there was to look at a startup idea that we could get funded from there. So they get a first right of refusal. And we sat on a couple of meetings to kind of see how they think. At that time, Lightspeed was a much smaller fund as well compared to what it is today. And it kind of gives you a different perspective on how investors look at the things versus how an entrepreneur looks at things. So that's the side, but it also made me feel like I don't think I'm ready to be an investor. I needed to be an entrepreneur.
So when did AI go from being just another technology trend for you to something that you realized would change everything?
So I think, look, AI has been brewing for the last 10 years, right? It's not like people think AI is today, it just came in from nowhere. No, no, it didn't. I mean, the Gen AI moment came in with, ChatGPT and all that. And then things started to accelerate in a much faster way. I mean, I know friends who did an AI specialization 20 years ago from college because that used to be the hot topic that they used to teach students. Only thing is there wasn't enough CPU, GPU resources, all of that wasn't really had not caught up, so the technology could not move at that pace, right? So I think after I use more and more of these technologies, I feel that we're kind of entering this age where we'll have to rethink some of the things, how we work. But at the same time, there is a lot of scare in my mind as to where this will take or how long, how will it move? Because if a technology moves in a slow progression in 5 to 10 years, people don't feel the shocks. You can absorb the shocks. When a technology moves at an accelerated pace like crazy, like it is doing today, it leaves a lot of dead bodies around, which may be unemployment, which may be negativity that is starting to appear and so on. And so I just think that if the technology just moves at the right pace, it will become more valuable. But today it is moving a little too fast, almost to the point of people who are active in this field also can't keep up. And that's not sustainable, right? I mean, it is okay for, you know, a couple of months. And the other thing that I'm finding is that, in Silicon Valley, we live in our own bubble, right? We think whatever we are doing is, the rest of the world has already caught up with us. That's not the reality. Um, I mean, I think one of the things that recently there was this whole big thing about, oh, SaaS is dead. Okay, let's step back. If I look at, you know, a CFO of a company or a customer support person of a company or a VP of sales, they've used certain tools. They're very comfortable with those tools. And you can give them an add-on onto that tool. That's okay. Now, if you tell them to replace it completely and deal with a new company, and I tried that, right? In many startups, even in our company, when I got in, I said, "Hey, have you looked at this, this, and this?" And the answer was, "Oh, yeah, they're nice, but they don't have the maturity that we need. I don't know if I can depend on them." Point is that even though we develop technology at a lightning pace, the technology doesn't get absorbed at a lightning pace, except in certain circles. So, like, programming, it has happened, but it hasn't happened in other fields. And if it actually does get absorbed at a lightning pace, it will have a lot of issues in the society, which we are not prepared for.
So you recently joined, is it Mavenir? Am I saying it right?
Mm-mm.
Oh, no, maybe not. So Everest, let's talk about Everest Lab. So which uses, like I guess you guys are using obviously AI. You at the top of the call you said it's like physical intelligence is I think the new buzzword, right? But robotics to sort recycling plants, right? So what got you excited about that company? Like what made you? I mean, now obviously robotics is all the buzz, right? But I spent about 8 years in robotics prior to 2013, and I can assure you that it was definitely not something that was top of mind for most people. But now it's taken front stage. So talk a little bit about like what got you attracted to that.
So, I was an advisor to the founder of Everest Labs, as well as an
Mm.
early investor in the company. So I've kind of, tracked them where the company was going. And then last year, I joined the board uh, as well and got more actively involved with the company. And then the board and CEO had, at that time had decided that, hey, we need to bring on an outside person so that we can help scale the company faster. And founder wanted to focus on the strategy and helping us expand into Europe and all that. And so, looking at what was coming out in general in the market and where I could add value, it seemed like I was a pretty good fit. And both the board and the founder convinced me that, hey, this is the right thing to do and help the company to grow. And it was an exciting space, even though I don't know anything about the recycling space. So I'm learning every day. And I spent the first 4 months before I took the job as the head of sales and trying to understand and visit some customers and figure it out as to what's going on in the industry. So that's where I am.
So you teach entrepreneurship, is it? at
Mhm.
Northeastern and UC Berkeley. So what's the one thing you wish every student founder understood before starting a company?
So I think um, the approach. So there are two approaches people seem to take in Silicon Valley. The classical approach is, I'm an engineer, I'm going to build something, and then I'll figure out there is a demand for it or not, just because I liked it, therefore I built it. And we always try to teach the students that, hey, there is a different path, which is you got to do some customer discovery first. Know the problem in the mind of the customer, because people are buying your products to solve a problem. And so if you want to build sustaining businesses, you kind of have to go back and understand that very well. And so I think the customer discovery is where most of the problems happen in the beginning, because people are not really realizing it. The second problem that happens a lot more, I think, uh, with I think we're kind of entering a stage where there is too much money available for startups, and so they tend to overspend very early, because you got too much money, you have a focus to grow, so you kind of overspend to grow. There is this that the reason, there are certain things that are probably needed first in order to grow. So I think it is really critical for the companies to get their first few wins and learn from it before you start to scale and say, okay, I need to hire 20 salespeople. Sometimes people don't even have a product market fit, and they'll hire they have investors on their board who've invested a lot of money. They'll get them the highest paying head of sales from some company which just went public, and so this guy is dying to go do something else. But that's not the right thing for you. That's not always right for a startup, because you still haven't figured out what is your ideal customer profile. You still haven't figured out what is your ideal message. You still haven't figured out what your sales cycle is going to be. So if you go do these things prematurely, you're just going to waste a lot of money and probably run out of money before it's too late.
You earned the Longevity Explorer designation from, is it Stanford's AI Longevity Lab? What drew you to the intersection of AI and longevity science?
I'm not involved in longevity. I don't believe in
Oh,
that. So maybe
oh, you don't? Oh, my bad. Maybe my
I just
research
think
was a little bit array there. Okay.
I don't think I want an infinite life, to be very
You
frank.
don't, eh? You're not into all this?
No, not me. I just want to be. I just want to make sure that how many years I have, I live healthy.
Got it.
That's all I
Okay, so
care
I
about.
guess I guess help me land the plane. This has been a delightful interview. Looking 5 years out, where do you think AI will create the most value that most people aren't seeing yet?
So I think the first area that AI has obviously hit is the white collar, right?
Mm.
But I think it's not where the biggest value is going to be created. I think the biggest value is going to be created on the manufacturing floor, in the processing plants, in running these things more efficiently, because I think you're going to have fewer and fewer people running these things. And so therefore the technology has to take you to that stage where it is possible to do that.
So, Paul Singh, where do people connect with your flow of thoughts? Do you write anywhere online on LinkedIn, and how do people connect with you? And then maybe also share the website one last time, just so people can go learn more about Everest Labs.
So the website is everestlabs.ai. And I write from time to time on Forbes or LinkedIn, but I am not, you know just don't have enough time to do enough writing. I always want to, but just don't do it enough. But yeah, I'm R Paul Singh on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in. I see we have almost 30 people listening, and yeah, for other people who check this out in the future. Until next time, yeah. And Paul Singh, just hang out for 1 minute. I'll bring this one to an end.
Thank you.